Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 8th Wall live learning session. So this is our bi-weekly webinar series where we invite our developer community to come join us for an interactive session of tips and tricks related to WebAR development. So in each session, we'll be talking about what's new at 8th Wall, things like recent announcements or new or updated features, sample projects that we've released, and so on. Then we'll dive into a relevant topic or demo followed by live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please enter them using the Zoom Q&A that you can see at the bottom of the webinar window. The session is being recorded, so we will post the link on YouTube, post the video on YouTube. We will also email everybody who's registered. But before we jump into today's content, just a couple of quick introductions. So again, my name is Tony Tamarchio. I'm the Director of Technical Operations here at 8th Wall, and I'm joined by Rigel Benton. He's our lead product designer. So I'm sure you've probably interacted with one of us or both of us in some different way, whether that's email, phone calls, or on our Slack channel. If you're not already a member of our public Slack channel, I really do suggest that you join. There are now over 3,500 members, and it's a great place to interact with the 8th Wall developer community, ask questions, share what we've created, and go from there. So between the two of us, Rigel and I have worked with thousands of WebAR developers. So our goal here with these live learning sessions is really to, pass along some of the tips and tricks we've learned along the way to help you and everyone else be more successful. We absolutely value developer feedback and input. So if you have any, feature requests or issues or comments about how things work or what you'd like to see in the future, please do reach out at any time. Today's topic is all about analytics, and specifically, we're going to be talking about how you can easily add Google Analytics to the WebAR projects that you build using 8th Wall. And with that, we're going to kick off today's live learning session. I'm going to turn things back over to Rigel, and he's going to talk about, give a quick overview of some recent updates from our team.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. I'm going to share my...
Stop sharing.
Okay. Cool. So I'm Rigel. If we haven't met, hi. I wanted to talk a little bit about our most recent announcement this past Monday, which is release 16. And we're all really excited about this release because it improves the core technology of 8th Wall's AR engine in a really tremendous way. Our engineers have been working for months on not just improving the engine, but also improving the ways that we visualize it internally and reducing error. And it's all culminated into this big release, R16, which you can read about on our blog. But I'll kind of talk about it briefly as I play these fun GIFs. So, the really important thing to take away from this is really these three key stats, right? So we've improved accuracy in both SLAM and image target tracking by 50%. So that's a 50% reduction in errors. And as you can see, from these little clips that I've made, that things that ordinarily would be very tricky to pull off, like tossing this book, for instance, with the cupcake on it, have become much easier to do. And so the difference is noticeable. And then the other thing is that it's improved performance by up to 70%. That varies by device. But to put it in perspective, these clips were all recorded with an iPhone XR from 2018. And so you're not looking at like top of the line, flagship devices, right? Like, in fact, some of the biggest gains have come from older devices. And so that's also really cool. The next thing is that we've gone back and improved our MediaRecorder. We're calling it an all new MediaRecorder, because if you've used it in the past, and maybe while you're recording, you noticed the frame rate started to kind of settle for a moment before finishing the recording. That doesn't really happen anymore. Now that we have the new, MediaRecorder, it's silky smooth throughout, and then you're going to get higher frame rate on the output as well. So not just a smoother recording, but also a smoother and higher quality video. So those are like the key features. The best news here is that, you already have this. So, when we push this out, unless you've explicitly frozen an engine version on your project, you should already be using release 16. And you can verify that when you look at your console logs, right? It'll say 8th Wall XR version 16.0. I think we're at 6 or something. And so you can read all about the different things that I've said and like maybe learn more about the specifics around that here. But if you're really curious about how we built it and how the engineering team, improved every aspect of our core tech, our VP of engineering, Nicholas Butko, wrote a really awesome blog, which is a deep dive into everything we do internally to visualize our SLAM, benchmark, all of the core technologies that make this possible. And he's talked about it at length in this blog post that I really encourage anyone with a technical eye to go in and check out, because it's a really fascinating read. And then to get started, if you're just joining us and you haven't started with 8th Wall yet and you want to take advantage of all of this, go ahead and clone one of our sample projects. The MediaRecorder functionality is in all of the face effects sample projects. And then anything with image targets and SLAM is available on the project library, sort of really easy to find. So that's the R16 update. I really hope everyone enjoys it. And I can't wait to see, what you all build with it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Rigel. Appreciate the update. Yeah, definitely R16 is a very, very exciting release here. So let me go ahead and share my screen back again, and we'll continue with the main topic for today's session. And that's all about WebAR analytics. So we're going to go through a handful of slides, and then I'm going to pull up a live demo, and we're going to go through and add some Google Analytics to an 8th Wall project here that I've built. So let's jump right into this. So the first question I always get when I talk to customers, is, when I build a WebAR experience, what type of analytics do I get from 8th Wall? Right? And the answer is quite simple. The answer is we provide one metric, and that's just the view count. So specifically, this is the number of times that the WebAR experience that you've built has been viewed. And that's the only metric that we provide. So what do we mean by a view? Well, this can differ slightly depending on whether you're using 8th Wall's hosting or whether you're self-hosting on your own web servers. For example, if you're building an experience and you're hosting with 8th Wall, basically any page view, anytime somebody goes and views the experience that you've built, that counts as a view. If they reload the page, that's a second view. Now, if you're self-hosting this and all of the files live on your own web server, basically it's a page view where the user grants camera permission and our AR engine starts. That's how we track views in both of those scenarios. So that's what you get by default from an analytics perspective. And we consciously did this for a couple of very specific reasons. We don't collect more information because, number one is most brands that you might be working with, building experiences for, and especially their legal teams, they often get very concerned when other companies start collecting data about their end users. So we don't. 8th Wall doesn't collect any personally identifiable information from the users who view the WebAR experiences that you build with 8th Wall. So our AR engine doesn't even install any cookies on the user's browser. And furthermore, everything is processed locally. So all computer vision, all of the SLAM, the image tracking, the face effects, all of that computer vision is processed locally and securely on device in browser. So this ensures we're compliant with all of the various acronyms that you see out there, GDPR, HIPAA, COPA, and I'm sure there are plenty of others, but these are the ones that come up the most that people are concerned with, ensuring that they're compliant with. But that said, because we only provide the view count, at the end of the day, keep in mind that you're building a web page, right? But now you're building a web page that has fancy augmented reality features in it. But because you're just building a web page, this gives you the flexibility to incorporate really any other web technology that you want to use. So this could be your, add your own favorite web analytics solution if that's something that you and your customer want to do. So this could be Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, you pick your favorite web analytics solution. And the good news here is, again, because you're building a web page, is For the most part, the process here is really, it's identical to the process of adding analytics to a quote unquote, normal web page or a non-AR web page. And this is something that people have been doing for years and years and years. So anybody who's built a web page in the past, added analytics to it, a lot of this is really just the same process. Now, the second reason why we collect the view count is because it's a component of how we license our products. So if you've seen on our pricing page, we have some different commercial license options. We have a basic, a standard, and a premium license, and those include a certain number of views per month. For example, 25,000, 500,000, 1 million views per month. So we're tracking the views, and that allows us to, to charge you for your license properly. Okay. Now, more specifics on the analytics that you do get from 8th Wall. So the first place you can find these project analytics is right there on the project dashboard. So if you log into your 8th Wall account, select your project, scroll down on that project dashboard page, you're going to see a recent trends graph. So this graph displays the views over the past 30 days. So this is a rolling window. So it's the window is shifting every single day. So yeah, another reason why you want to add in your own analytics if you want more detailed and or more historical analytics, and save that. So this graph, you can view it in 2 different ways. First is the total views. So here I can see, like, for this time period, how the total view count has increased over time, and you can see what it is as of a certain date. There's also another toggle kind of towards the top left of the little widget where you can toggle it over to daily. So here, for example, is another view where you can look at the view count, on a daily basis. You can see, like, oh, we did some more marketing of a WebAR experience. We got a big traffic spike, on a particular day. You can view all of this. Now, additionally, if you have a commercial license on one of your WebAR projects, we also show a usage box. So this is showing you the views in the current billing period, right? You might have bought a license, 5 days ago, and the overall graph will show the 30-day window, but you might be concerned, well, how many views have I gotten so far in my billing period? So this is just an example that shows you how many views you've got in the current billing period, and it also tells you how many days you have left in the billing period as well. Okay, so basically that's where you would find the 8th Wall provided analytics. Again, it's all on the project dashboard, both the recent trends graph as well as the usage for your commercial projects. So what we're going to be switching gears into in just a moment is a demo of how you can add Google Analytics to an 8th Wall project if you want more robust analytics, or to track, for example, things that people are doing inside the WebAR experience, not just, standard stuff like, what region and what country and what browser and what type of device. That, these are the standard things that tools like Google Analytics provide, like, right out of the box. But you might want to fire events like, well, how many people have activated my image target, or how many spawned 3D models on the surface, or interact with them in some way. And the beauty of Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, and I'm sure other analytics packages as well, is they allow you to fire custom events really anywhere in your code to signal that a particular action has happened. So again, flexibility of the web here, you can really kind of track anything at any point in your code. Okay. So definitely some best practices. You're building a WebAR experience for your client. They're definitely going to want to know how this thing performed. So you want to add your own custom web analytics. Discuss this with your client early in the project lifecycle. I've seen too many cases where someone launches a campaign, they let it run for a few months, and then they come back and they saying that their client wants to know how the campaign's been performing. And they want more specifics than just a typical user count. And my response is typically a question. It's like, well, did you add Google Analytics or something to the project before you went live? Because we're just providing you with the basic view count. So definitely discuss this early, figure out what type of metrics that they're interested in. Do they want to know just view count, or session duration, location of users, or or do they want to get more granular and understand what people are doing inside the WebAR experience itself? So again, build this in as you develop. This should not be an afterthought. So before I jump into the demo, just a couple of prerequisites. So today's session is not meant to be a full start to finish, training course on how to use Google Analytics. So, there is an assumption here that, you have some basic information, basic knowledge about how Google Analytics already works. You'll have a Google Analytics account. I'm going to talk about using Google Tag Manager along with Google Analytics. And if you do need to get more information, I've set up a couple of eighth.io short links. So you can visit eighth.io/GA, eighth.io/GTM, as well as eighth.io/GTM-setup. So if you want to get up to speed a little bit further with, kind of the basics of Google Analytics, I definitely suggest looking at those links here. Okay, so today we're going to focus on a couple of things, adding a couple of things to an 8th Wall web experience. One is we of course want to track the page views as well. And then secondly, I'm going to show you how we can use triggers and tags and then fire custom events inside of a sample project. Okay. And with that, I have one more slide here before we jump in. We also have a blog article that I suggest you check out. If you just go to eighthwall.com/blog, as Rigel mentioned earlier, there's an article called Measuring Augmented Reality Experiences. The link here is on your screen, and I definitely suggest checking that out, to learn more about this as well. We also have a section in our documentation. You go to docs.eighthwall.com. There's a whole section about adding Google Analytics to your 8th Wall project. Okay. And with that, let me stop sharing the slides and we're going to bring up some demos here. So, okay, great. Let's get in here. And okay, so what I have here today is a sample project here. It's my Google Analytics sample project. And essentially this is a pretty basic experience, and I've combined a few different things from a few different projects from our project library. So essentially this sample project that we're looking at here today is kind of a combination of what we call our placeground example. So this is the sample project where you can tap on the surface in front of you and spawn 3D models. So one of the things we want to do is, send custom events, fire events when people spawn a 3D model in their space. Secondly, we've also, I've added in some of the components from our image target flyer project. So this is a case where I have a couple of different image targets, and one of the image targets spawns a 3D model. The other image target triggers a video that I can play and I could pause. And then thirdly, I have an example of capturing a photo. So we want to understand like how many of the users capture photos, how many of them were successful, or sometimes like if it didn't capture the photo for them, you can get all the information about success or failure. How many times did they exit out of the preview UI, those types of things. Okay. So here, there's no Google Analytics in the project so far. So the first thing we need to do is just add some basic Google Tag Manager code to our project. So what I've done here is I have a tab and I have a sample, Google Tag Manager account that I've set up. And I'm going to go up here towards the top right, and you have like your unique ID. So I've got my Google Tag Manager ID. And I can click on this, and it gives you some instructions here at the top of the page. It says, well, first of all, we're going to copy and paste this code into the head of the page, and as high in the head of the page as possible. And then secondly, we're going to put another set of code in the body. So let's copy this over. And I'm going to go here, and I'm going to paste this in, and we're going to go into the head.html of our Cloud Editor project, and we're going to paste in this Google Tag Manager provided code snippet. Okay. Now it wants us to grab a second code snippet here, and then we're going to put this into the body. So I'm going to copy this, and let's go back. So here I'm going to add a new file. We're going to call this gtm.html. Okay, and let's copy, and we're going to include this HTML file in our project, so it adds it into the body. Okay, so now we're going to include this. So I'm going to go in here, and we're just going to say import star as Google Tag Manager. Let's just say HTML from gtm.html. Make sure I don't have any typos here. Okay, so we've got that Google Tag Manager, and then we are going to do a document dot body. We're going to insert this. Insert adjacent HTML. And we'll say after, not the beginning, so after begin. Okay, and Google Tag Manager HTML. Let me just copy this so I don't have any typos. Okay, so we've done a couple of basic setup steps here. So let me save and build the project. And assuming I don't have any typos and I did this all correctly and pasted things right, it's going to build my project, and it's build completed. And now let's preview this. So I'm going to bring up, let me share the screen of my phone here. So let's bring up a QuickTime Player really quick, and we will capture what's happening on my device. Okay, let's switch over to the iPhone that I have connected to my computer here. Okay, so I bring up the URL here. Grant browser permissions. And here we go. So I have this basic experience, and I can tap, I can grow trees, and we'll look at the image target stuff in just a little bit. But if I go over to Google Analytics, I should see here that, let's go back over to the real time and overview. And it's showing you, that I've got, I'm the only user on this page right now. So it's tracking me in real time. I can see the page that I viewed. It shows me my location and all of this, standard and great information that Google Analytics is already providing. So, that's a great start. Now, when people visit my page, it's going to start tracking all of kind of the standard Google Analytics type of data that it collects. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to do some configuration. So what I did here is I'm going to go back into Google Tag Manager, and the first thing we do is we create a variable, right? So I have a variable here called Google Analytics settings. So let's click on this and take a look. So this is basically a Google Analytics setting, and I grabbed my Google Analytics tracking ID and I pasted that in, and I got that within Google Analytics, basically under admin, property settings, and you can copy and paste your ID there. So essentially this variable is kind of linking, if you will, it's linking the Google Tag Manager and the Google Analytics so that they can share common settings and things like that. Okay, so the way that you would do this is essentially you go into here, you would say new, give it a name, you call it like my GA variable or something like that. And we will select that this is a, what is it? Google Analytics settings, and you would paste in your Google Analytics tracking ID. So I've already created this, but this is how you would create this on your own here. So we're going to discard these changes for right now. Okay, so I have this setting. Okay, now just by basically doing that, we also have a tag here. And I've created tag for page views. So this page view, if we look at the configuration, it's basically the tag type is Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, and we're tracking page views. And then you have to select your Google Analytics settings variable. And the trigger for this tag is going to be all page views. So anytime anybody views the page, we want to fire this event, and we want to start tracking page views within Google Analytics. So that's how we got to the point where we were just tracking basic, page information. Okay, so what we probably want to do next is let's now figure out how to track what's happening inside the WebAR experience. So I want to know, for example, when users are spawning trees, or when things are moved around, or when an image target is detected. Somebody's rotated my 3D model, or they've stopped or started a video asset inside the WebAR experience. Okay, so I've pre-created a bunch of these tags here and triggers, and we'll create a new one just to show you how that works. But so first thing is we have a number of triggers. So in Google Tag Manager world, these are custom events. So let's look at, how about the place model one? Let's first start tracking when I tap and I grow a tree on my space, let's fire that. So here we've got a trigger, and this trigger is called place model. The type is a custom event, and I've given it a name. And the name of this is called place model. Now, this trigger is contained in a tag. So I have a tag here called 3D model place. And this is a Google Analytics event. It's a, you can define your own categories. So I just kind of labeled this myself as like the category is a user interaction, the action is a 3D model, and the label is create. And then you link your Google Analytics variable here. And then the trigger that's going to fire this tag is this custom event that I've called place model here. Okay, so we've done similar things for, if we just look at all these triggers, I've created some triggers for when one called hold drag. So when I drag a 3D model around, for example, like when is an image target is found, if I do a one finger rotate over a 3D model, pause video, place the model, play a video, and then some screenshot related events, like when was a screenshot requested by the user, when was the screenshot ready or errored, or when did they close out of the screenshot, and things like that. And for each of these triggers, I have a corresponding tag. So again, a tag can be one or more triggers can fire off a tag, right? So here we go. So we have all these kind of set up, and then in addition, I have this generic page view experience. So, okay. So now let's go back into our project and let's add these events into the JavaScript. And the nice thing about this is it's literally just adding one line of code in different places. So for example, we've got the place model. Okay. Okay, so for example, I've got a component here called tap place, and this is my A-frame component that is basically raycasting against the surface. And when I tap on the page, it's going to spawn a 3D model. So I want to track an event when that happens. So let me minimize this here. Okay, so essentially what this is doing is we have a click event listener, and that generates a 3D model. It sets the position based on the raycast intersection. And then once the model is loaded, it makes the 3D model visible, and it does a cool little animation. So it kind of pops up on your screen. And once that's done, then let's fire this event. So I've got the code here just to save some time during our webinar, but it's essentially, it's as simple as a single line of JavaScript. And here I typed in window.datalayer.push. So I'm sending this object to Google Analytics, and it's an event. So I'm pushing an event, and the name of my event is called place model. Okay, so now let's go ahead and save and build this. So we've added this into the project. It's building an update. And if I go ahead and reload, bring up the phone, it's reloading the page here for me. And I go ahead and now I've got my experience once again, and let's spawn a couple of models. So I just spawned 6 trees here. Now let's switch back over to the Google Analytics page, and let's see what's going on. So I'm going to go into real time, and if I did this right, we should see some events here. So I'm going to go to events, and not just active users, but let's go to events, let's say in the last 30 minutes. So, and there we go. So this is great. This is what I was expecting to see. I've got an event that was, the category was what these are the labels that I set up. So user interaction, the event type was a 3D model. Let's drill in a little bit deeper. And you can see that I created a 3D model, and it's 6. So this matches up with how many 3D models I've spawned in my space. Let's bring up the demo screen here again, and let's spawn a couple more. Give this a second or two, and you're actually going to see my screen update here. And this is going to go from 6 to now it just flashed green and an update, and I placed 3 more trees. So now this event has been triggered 9 times. So again, this is just a basic example of just firing an event at some custom place in your code to track, whatever interaction or whatever kind of an event that's taking place in your WebAR experience. So let's add a couple more of these, and then we'll create a new tag at the end. So maybe I want to understand like when an image target is found. So I also have a couple of image targets in this project. I have this model target and I have a video target. And if I pull these up here for you, what you'll see, let me move this over, is when I point my phone at this image target on the left, it spawns a 3D model, and I can rotate, I can swipe my finger side to side and interact with this. Or over here, this is going to spawn a video, and I can tap and I can play the video here. So there we go. And I can tap and I can pause it. So maybe we want to track those types of events, and we can do that very easily as well if I go back into the project. So, you know, I also have an image target script here. Again, a lot of these components are readily available in our XR Extras library. In this case, I've, you know, copied the code and made my own custom version because, you know, I want to basically insert my own Google Analytics event codes here. So pretty simple here we have an event listener. So when our image target is found, the XR image found event is fired. We have a listener here called show image. And this function, in addition to basically setting the position and rotation and scale of the content to align with the image target, it's making the 3D model true. And then here we're pushing an event called, well, image target found. So we can enable that. Okay, now, you know, you saw that one of the assets that was triggered on the image target was a video. And we perhaps want to track, well, when somebody is playing the video, how many people pause the video, kind of how are they interacting with this video asset. So I'm going to go down here into my play video function, and it just basically as a click event listener on the video that if it's not playing, it plays it. And it's going to now fire an event. So we have window.datalayer.push, and the event here is called play video. So all of these strings that I'm putting for the event names, these match, should match exactly what you put into the triggers in the Google Tag Manager configuration. Now, if it's already playing and somebody taps on it, it's going to pause the video, and we're going to fire another event that pauses it. Okay. Now, we also have some screenshot capabilities here. So if you look on the screen, maybe I want to take a screenshot of what I'm doing here. So when they click the screenshot button, that requests a screenshot. And then if it's successful, it returns the image. Or if they click this X and dismiss the image preview, you know, perhaps we want to fire events for those scenarios as well. So I have kind of that logic here in this script called photomode.js. And here we're going to basically put these back in where when somebody clicks on the close button, this is going to fire the event called screenshot closed. When they click on the shutter button, which is how they can initiate the screenshot, that'll fire the screenshot request Google Tag Manager event. And then if there's an error for some reason, we can fire off a screenshot error event. And, you know, if there's no error and it's successful and the screenshot's ready, then we'll fire a screenshot ready event. Okay. And then let's do that. So let's save and build once again. So now I've basically taken the WebAR experience that I've already built and is already working. And, you know, with a line of JavaScript here and there, we're just inserting these Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics events so that I can now have a better understanding as to what's happening in my experience. So let's bring that back up and let's show you what's happening here. Okay, so here is my project, grant camera permissions. And let me rearrange some of these windows here for you really quick. It's going to be easier to see. And there we go. Let's bring up the image targets here. Okay. All right. So here I've got my demo, and I can go ahead and, oops, I cancel out of that. There we go. So now I've got, I can spawn the 3D models. I can interact with them. I can capture a screenshot. I can cancel out of it. Let's bring up my image targets here. There we go. Bring up the image targets. Let's scan the image target. We can interact with it. Let's scan the other image target, and we will play the video. I'm going to tap on the video, and let's pause the video as well. And there we go. So hopefully this has been tracking everything that I've been doing. Let's go back into Google Analytics and see what's happened here. And yep, sure enough, it's logged all these different events. So now in the past 30 minutes, I've placed 18 3D models. I've activated 2 image targets. I requested 1 screenshot. It was successful, so that's great. And then I've had one interaction where I closed out of the screenshot preview. And then we activated the video, we played it once, and we paused it once. So, you can certainly decide when you're working on this project and when you're talking with your client, what type of specific interactions and specific analytics that you want to provide. But the good news is, this is quite simple, to add these into your April project. Again, it's just a simple matter of adding like this window.datalayer.push event to the appropriate place in your code. Okay, so with that, we've got about 5 or 10 minutes left in our session here. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see what type of questions we have out there in the audience. So, okay, actually, yeah, okay, Rigel, why don't we open things up for Q&A at this point?
Yeah, looks like we have a few questions here, all regarding analytics.
Great. Okay, let's see here. So we have one question about the code that we talked about here today, and it says in window.datalayer.push event, blah, 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 the string place model has to be the same as the name we defined in the trigger configuration of field event. Yes, that's right. So I can share my screen again if needed, but yeah, when I set up those triggers, I created the trigger, and the type of the trigger was a custom event, and I gave the custom event a name. And in this example, I called it place model with a capital M. And yeah, that is what you would want to have matched in the window.datalayer.push event. Yeah. We have another question about, can Google Analytics provide information such as location by city and device type? Yeah, so those are types of things that Google Analytics kind of provides by default. So let's actually take a look. I can share my screen once again, and let's see here. So let me let me bring this back up for you. Good question. Share my screen, and there we go. Okay. So if we look back to this first screen that we looked at, it's telling me that there's one active user on the site right now, and it can tell me like what page that they're on, and it is telling me that this is close, probably based on my IP, but I'm in Redwood City, not in San Carlos, but it's close enough. And if I drill down, you can see all of this information. So you can look at locations, United States. You can drill down. So this is information that, by doing nothing more than just adding Google Analytics to your project, like this is the type of information that it pretty much tracks by default. And there's a lot of, we've been focusing more on like the events, but it also tracked like traffic sources, like where the traffic was coming from, if it's been referred from other sites. Maybe we look at audience, and we look at, I think it's under technology. Again, you can look at like browser and OS. And yep, this is an iPhone 11 that I was using for the demo today, using Safari. So you can see the information about, by browser, or, all this information is built right in geo, language, location. So yeah, so my phone is EN-US locale. So yep, great question. Can you measure time? Yeah, so Google Analytics also provides ways to measure like session time and things like that. So that's also something you can accomplish using Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. So, okay, if there are any other questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat window or the Q&A window. We'd be happy to address them. We do actually have a couple of non-analytics, or one more analytics question is, what about other analytics solutions? Do I have to use Google Analytics, or can I use something else? Good question. The answer is you can absolutely use whatever analytics package you want. So the thing to remember here is, when you're building an experience with 8-Ball, at the end of the day, you're building a web page. So this is HTML, this is CSS, this is JavaScript. So you have full flexibility to incorporate really any other third-party web library you want. Google Analytics is one. You might have Google Maps or AWS voice recognition services or Adobe Analytics. So really the sky's the limit here. You have a lot of flexibility to incorporate whatever analytics package most suits you, and or your client. So good question. All right. We have an unrelated question. people have questions on our public Slack channel. So any of the questions that you want to ask there, you can ask here as well. We had a question about connected domains. So in your project, so by default, you get an eighthwall.app URL. So in the case of this project, my workspace is called Tony Test. So my URL here is tonytest.eighthwall.app/Google Analytics. But we also provide the ability to point custom domains at your project. So I might want to buy a custom domain, www.tonyar.com or something like that. And with a couple of DNS changes, you can point that domain at the eighth wall infrastructure. And the question we have here is, can you connect multiple domains to a project? The answer is you can connect multiple subdomains, but they all have to share the same root domain. So you currently can't connect, domain1.com and domain2.com, but I could connect, subdomain1.domain.com and subdomain2.domain.com to the same project. One thing that does come up quite a bit in Slack channel and support is having to do with root domains. So if I want to connect a root domain like mydomain.com instead of a subdomain like www.mydomain.com, not all DNS providers support that. It's actually not part of the official DNS spec. So some providers do, for example, like Cloudflare, Route 53 from AWS, those do, others don't. So my recommendation would be check with your DNS provider to make sure that if you're trying to connect a root domain, that they support it. They might call it an A name or an alias record or a C name for root domains. Sometimes they call it different things. So hope that answers the question. And then Rigel, we actually have a question I'm going to turn over to you that's been coming up kind of a lot about transparency and transparent objects in a scene. And the question is, can I have multiple transparent objects like in front of one another? I don't know if you want to have any thoughts or comments on that.
So we have, we have this component as part of XR Extras that you may have seen in our projects called the XR Extras hider material. And what this basically does is it just blocks rendering of everything behind it. But when you're using an A-frame project, what's important to remember is you want to put that object, the thing that's going to block rendering, above the things you want to block in the DOM. So this would be like, you'd list that first, and then afterwards, you'd list all the other things that you'd want to block. And this is because A-frame actually looks at the order of your HTML tags, and it uses that to understand the render sort order of the scene. And then if you have like multiple, let's say there are PNGs that have transparency, but then they seem to be blocking each other and it's not what you want, you can check out, there's a value or a parameter on these PNGs, on the material property for like an A-plane, for instance, or any object, but an A-plane would be what you would apply this texture to, called an alpha test. And if you actually, set that to be greater than 0, or it's either greater than 0 or less than 1, it will.
It's greater than 0.
Yeah, okay, great. So anyway, that will let you pass through it, and then it won't block the rendering anymore. It'll kind of, you'll notice as you change that value, the outer edges will just sort of shrink to the object, like your content, and then kind of peel away at the edges. So it's kind of like feathering. You can kind of think of it like that. But anyway, that would allow you to stack multiple transparent images as well as videos or whatever else you're trying to stack there.
Awesome, thanks, Rigel. I think we've addressed all of the questions in the Q&A panel here. So again, we've got another minute or two. If you do have any last minute questions, please feel free to ask. Again, if you think of a question later, reach out to us, go to eighthwall.com/Slack, join if you haven't already, and we can chat with you over there. So let me bring up the final slide before we wrap things up. Share my screen once again. Okay, and there we go. So once again, thanks for joining. We hope this was a valuable session. Again, today's topic primarily focused on adding WebAR or adding analytics to your WebAR experience. We specifically went through some examples of some basic configuration with Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. Follow us on Twitter. We're at the 8th Wall. And again, if you haven't already joined our developer Slack community, definitely recommend you do so. It's as simple as going to 8thwall.com/Slack, and that'll bring you to the sign up link. Thanks again for joining our live learning session, and we'll see you on the next one.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.